Today is Monday, January 20th, and I'm just wondering about two things. Tonight's National College Football Playoff Championship and one Cowboy head coaching candidate in particular.
And now, a word from our title sponsor.
We aim to turn your nest egg into a paycheck with half the amount you've been led to believe. Fluent Financial combines in-house portfolio design and risk management with income-generating investments designed to accelerate your financial independence. Our goal is to develop an effective portfolio strategy to help you retire sooner and have a better lifestyle. Visit fluentfinancial.com.
For more than 3 decades, Bob's Steak and Chop House has remained an icon of DFW restaurants. Why? Well, maybe it's because of Bob. He's fanatical about cleanliness and friendliness, and his food, oh my Lord, his food. If you've been there, you know about it. If you haven't been there, you should know about it. The original Bob welcomes you at either of his 2 locations, Bob's on Lemon Avenue or the sparkling new Bob's at Craig Ranch, McKinney. Tonight, Ohio State is an 8-point favorite to beat Notre Dame for the National College Football Championship. This 12-team playoff has brought us a lot of excitement. Apparently, there's some thought of going to 14 teams and maybe eventually then to 16 teams. But the jump to 12 teams has brought us some wonderful games. Tonight, Ohio State is the favorite, and you know what? When the year began, many people expected Ohio State to be in this game. Almost nobody expected Notre Dame to be here. It's not that Notre Dame's not a respected team, but when they lost to Northern Illinois early in the season, their bandwagon was suddenly totally empty. But the Irish have dug in, and here they are playing for a national championship. Notre Dame got here by beating Indiana and Georgia and Penn State. Those are the numbers 10, 2, and 6 rated teams in the last college football standings. Indiana, they got well ahead of, and the final score a win by 10. It seemed like more than that. But against Georgia, they won 23-10, and they got 17 points within a 1-minute span at the end of the first half and the start of the second half, which began with a Notre Dame 98-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. And then they beat Penn State by 3 in a terrific football game. Ohio State got here by beating, remember, Notre Dame beat number 2, number 6, and number 10. Ohio State beat number 1, number 5, and number 9. But boy, has Ohio State been impressive. They beat the living hell out of Tennessee. I know the final margin was only 25 points, but it sure seemed like more than that. And then they beat Oregon, the number 1 team in the country, the only undefeated team left in college football. And Ohio State beat the hell out of them. I know the final score is 41-21, but the Buckeyes leaped to a substantial early lead, and from that point, the game was basically over. Now, the Texas game was a good, tough football game, but Ohio State made a late play that made it a 14-point win. In their 3 wins, Ohio State's defense is allowing 18 points per game. But you know what? It seems like a lot less than that because Tennessee and Oregon scored late to make the final scores, even though they were blowouts, seem more respectable. That win over Notre Dame by Ohio State left me thinking, or that win over Texas, rather, left me thinking something. Had Texas won that game, what would have been the wagering line on Texas versus Notre Dame? I think Texas would have been favored somewhere in the area of 5 points. My question in this game is, can Notre Dame balance their offense and drive the ball for touchdowns against Ohio State? When Notre Dame played Penn State, they only averaged 2.8 yards per carry rushing the football. And when they played Georgia, it was 4.2 yards a carry, which is okay. But in that game, the Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard accounted for 80 of the rushing yards. All the other backs for Notre Dame ran the ball 23 times for 74 yards. That's about 3.2 yards a carry. 2.8 and 3.2 will not get it done against Ohio State. And that's where my opinion stands on this game. I don't think Notre Dame can score much against Ohio State. Now, Notre Dame's got a sound and resilient defense, but I see this being an Ohio State double-figure win in a low-scoring game. Next, to that vacant Cowboy head coaching position.
Mary and I are Crest Cadillac people. For what, about 15 years now?
That's about right. Crest Cadillac XT4. Perfect size, perfect ride for us.
Crest Cadillac at 121 on the Tollway in Frisco now has terrific offers on the Cadillac Lyrique and the soon-to-be-available all-electric Escalade. GM Mike Brusen's team is fantastic to work with, so join Mary and me as
Crest Cadillac people.
Today, the Cowboys will interview Leslie Frazier for the head coaching job. He's really not a candidate. I hate to say this, but the rule in the NFL is you have to interview two minority candidates. And with Robert Salah on Saturday and Leslie Frazier today, the Cowboys have fulfilled that rule. They interviewed virtually on Friday former Cowboy offensive coordinator, former Cowboy backup quarterback, former Cowboy quarterbacks coach Kellen Moore. He is now the Eagles offensive coordinator. So he's on to the NFC Championship against Washington. Philly versus Washington for the NFC Championship. That has to chap Jerry Jones. Anyway, back to the vacant coaching position. Kellen Moore was interviewed virtually, but he's a substantial candidate for this job. And let me tick off some things about Kellen Moore that makes him attractive. First, he knows Jerry. He knows how the organization works. And when you come to Dallas, that's especially important because no other franchise in this league works the way the Cowboys do. Nobody else in this league has an owner who's also the general manager, whose son is the personnel director, whose other daughter is, well, you get the picture. And if Kellen Moore comes here, there'll be no need to play catch-up. He knows the people here. He's only been gone 2 years, and I think Kellen Moore would adapt way more quickly in this organization than anyone else. And if Kellen Moore is the head coach, I think Jerry could easily push him to keep Mike Zimmer as the defensive coordinator. By the way, nothing wrong with that. And that he would add Jason Witten to the staff as a tight ends coach and maybe associate head coach. And by the way, nothing wrong with that. And maybe it would also enable the Cowboys to keep some staffers who are now out of work because all the assistant coaches' contracts are up. And Kellen Moore does not demand the spotlight. Kellen Moore is a fairly quiet and introspective fellow, and thus he wouldn't clash with Jerry, who definitely does demand the spotlight. And the offense, while Kellen Moore was here, really cooked. The only reason Kellen Moore left is Mike McCarthy wanted to take back the job of play calling. And why? Well, because in the 2 losses to San Francisco, the last 2 years Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator here, the Cowboys offense, let me be kind here. It stunk. But Kellen Moore, I've had very little contact with Kellen Moore. But I'll tell you this, what contact I've had, he seems like a smart dude to me. And if he is the head coach here, he or anyone else is going to need some tools here. He's going to need some additions. He or anyone else joins a team where it's got a veteran quarterback who's been hurt 3 of the last 5 years, who I think cannot be expected to be a terribly mobile quarterback. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Jared Goff's not very mobile. Matthew Stafford's not mobile at all, and they made the playoffs this year. But Kellen Moore, or whoever gets this job, is going to need a running back. I think the Cowboys are going to allow Rico Dowdle to leave in free agency. Now, the Cowboys could use their first-round pick on a running back, but that's not necessary. The second round, the third round, you can find good runners in those rounds. And, for instance, if you don't take a running back in the first round, and there's a standout tackle available offensively, yeah, I think I'd take that. Because the tackle they drafted last year, I will say again, I think should either be moved inside the guard or over the other side to right tackle, which, by the way, that's a place I would also be worried about him. This team needs to do what so many other of the major contenders have done in the NFL. Detroit, the Rams, Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo, Houston. Craft an offensive line. A line capable of blocking for the quarterback and blocking for the run. This Cowboy offensive line, which just 2, maybe 3 years ago, was regarded as one of the best in the league, I think is now regarded in the middle of the league. But Kellen Moore must also realize one thing. If he leaves the Eagles, he leaves a team that, if you compare them with the Cowboys, he leaves behind the better quarterback, Jalen Hurts, over Dak Prescott. By far the better running back with Saquon Barkley in Philadelphia. A superior set of wide receivers. A much better offensive line. And maybe even a slightly better tight end, Goddard versus Jake Ferguson. But whoever gets this job, though Kellen Moore makes a lot of sense, whoever gets this job is going to have to hit the ground running with this offense.
Today's episode brought to you by Fluent Financial. Retire sooner, better lifestyle. And by Crest Cars. There's good, there's better, and then there's Crest. And by Bob's Steak and Chop House.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Just Wondering with Norm Hitzges. If you enjoyed what you heard, please hit follow, and a fresh new episode will be delivered to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you know someone who might enjoy our work, please share it with them. I'm Norm Hitzges, and I'm always just wondering about something.
And I'm Mary Hitchkus, and I'm just wondering too.